welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, hello. Thank you for coming over to my little part of the internet world. Oh, that sounds so cheesy. Okay, I need to get the elephant out of the room. There are no candles, okay? Unlike last week's episode, there is no candles here to burn anything because this particular paperwork and everything that I have around is very, very precious and I do not want them getting singed by candles. No offence to the people in the, candle community. I love my candles still, but I don't love them when they start to burn important things of mine. You may have noticed that I now have a new logo. I would like to do a shout out and a thank you to Nikki from Littlepencildesign, who has worked with me since I would say around about October of last year when I approached her. My channel was very much still in its infancy and I didn't know if I was actually going to pursue this or not. I just wanted everything to seem a little bit polished, but I was still on the fence of where I was actually going to go with things and what essentially the style of my channel would be. So if you do happen to flick through, you will see my first few videos are fairly rough around the edges and I was just trying to kind of like find my style, as it were, and at the moment I'm quite happy with my style. I try to inject a bit of comedy and I don't do the traditional plan with me's. Now, for the people who are new here, you'll be wondering what on earth has that girl got that massive, great big typewriter there for? Well, if you haven't already watched some of my previous videos, I am a typewriter enthusiast. I collect typewriters as a hobby and I use them in my planners. I plan my week, I lay down stickers and then I type everything up. I also now find myself typing up lots of other things. So for example, I also wrote out me and my husband's song, our song, and I just typed it up. I also sometimes do little quizzes, so I will type up quotes from our favourite films or TV programmes. So this is my newest typewriter. Now it is new to me, however, this is a vintage typewriter. On my previous intros you will see one of my previous typewriters, which was a Royalite, and that was the first typewriter that got me into typewriters. And I have learnt about the Mercedes of typewriters, which are Olympia. For me, this is now the brand that I feel most akin to is the Olympias. They are smooth and they are just, I just find myself, touching them. Everything is solid, it is that German build, like how they talk about golfs, and the door and the, nothing sounds or feels like a golf. Well, to me, at the moment, nothing feels like an Olympia. Now, I will warn you that this video may kind of like switch back and forth, because I have a lot to talk about. If you are tuning in because you're wanting to see a plan with me, this isn't actually going to be the episode for you, because I am just using this particular video to introduce my new logo, to introduce some history and some fact-finding information about this beautiful vintage machine. Next week, everything will carry on as I have done before, and I will do a theme on a plan with me. I also have to keep going back periodically to some notes. And when I say some notes, it is quite extensive, as you will see. So, moving on, here is the story into this particular typewriter. Let's go back to 2020 and I join a Facebook group. Everything that I talk about or links that I make reference to, I will make sure in the description box below, just to let you all know. So I put a post up stating that I was looking for an Olympia typewriter And I was quite specific. You know how you see these posts, picky but polite? That was me. So I had in mind that I wanted either a grey, black or a white Olympia. Now, I was then sent a private message from a lovely gentleman called David Traps. Now, David and I have spent quite a long time talking to each other, and I've told David that I was planning on making a short video, which will probably end up long, because I always say, oh, it's just going to be a short video, and 35 minutes later, that I would like to be able to talk in brief about David, because he plays a part of the history of this typewriter, and he has given me permission, as with all of the people who are alive, have given me permission to talk about the history of this typewriter, just as a little reference point. David gave me a little bit of background information into him, and it goes as follows. David worked as a typewriter repairer, engineer, and he worked in his uncle's typewriter and stationery shop. He essentially came out of school and went straight to his uncle's business in 1977. David has shared with me some absolutely beautiful memories of, he can remember working down in the cellar, washing out certain typewriters that were brought in for servicing, and that there was a pub nearby, and that through the walls he could hear the music and people talking. And it gave me this beautiful image, you know, in my head of David washing out these typewriters and the pub and the noises and all of those things that we're missing during this pandemic. In around about 1982, he moved into photocopiers, because obviously there was a point where typewriters were just not used as much anymore. We brought, you know, electric typewriters came in, and then beyond electric typewriters, of course, came personal computers and Microsoft Word and all of those kind of things, and everything was able to be mass printed. Back in the day, you would have people who were, you know, very, very highly skilled at touch typing, and they would have a piece of paper, carbon paper, and and then another piece of paper to be able to do documents. Everything took longer. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that it was harder or anything else like that, but that the process was longer. Whereas now, we just click a button and you can duplicate however, you know, pieces of paper of a certain text or whatever you want, in the hundreds if you absolutely need to. David then returned back into servicing typewriters, and now has an Etsy shop, and it's called QWERTY. Now, I knew of QWERTY, but when I was looking for a typewriter, there was nothing actually in the shop that drew me in. A few private messages later, and David shows me an image of a grey SM, and I was like, yep, that's the one, thank you very much. David just needed to do a few adjustments with it and just to finish off giving it a service, and then it was going to be mine. We got into a conversation about typewriters, as you do when you're an enthusiast about something and you find somebody who has an awful lot of knowledge. We engaged in conversation, and David brought up with me that he had a typewriter that was also pretty much ready to go onto his Etsy shop. And he sent me an image of it, and it was this, and it is green. And the strange thing is that in my posts when I was advertising that I was looking for a typewriter, I specifically said I do not want a SM3 in green, because they tended to be the most common colour. David said that this particular typewriter that I am lovingly stroking here came with some interesting history, and he sent me an image of it. And this is where the love affair began. It began here with this very thin and delicate receipt. Now, I'm going to bring this receipt up to you. I'm going to try and keep it in shot, because I also have a new camera. This is the second time I've attempted to film this, because my first camera filmed for 3.5 minutes overheated and turned off. So here we go. I'm hoping that you can all see this. This is a receipt from Harrods, Knightsbridge, London, and the date, the 8th of the 2nd, 1955. It has the information. It says Olympia. Now, unfortunately, I can't quite read that handwriting. I believe it says Olympia, and then it looks like a P-O, possibly an S-T, Olympia Post Typewriter. And it has the serial number, Elite with, and then it says something here, but unfortunately, I cannot decipher that writing. Now, when the picture was first sent to me, I believed that the total amount here was £3, 4 shillings and 10 pence. That's what I believed the amount to be, because the image that I first saw was a little bit grainy, so that's how much I originally thought it was for. When I actually then got the typewriter, it's actually £34 and 10. That's a significant difference. Now, I've been on the old Google, and £34 and 10 pence in 2020's money is £900. This was in 1955. This was a significant purchase. And somebody kept the receipt, and it was in pristine condition. Now, my heart fluttered with intrigue. After I'd agreed that I would have the grey typewriter of David, I kept thinking about that receipt, because I'd seen an address and a name, and I wasn't interested. It was green. It was nothing that I was looking for. And, you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I didn't have much else to do. So I contacted my friend, Sarah, and I sent her a message. She used to be a PCSO. She might be able to help me. This had sparked something in me that I wanted to find out where this typewriter had been. I knew where it was brought from, wanted to know where it went from there. Based on the original picture that I was sent, I believed the address or the numbers was 127 or 37 or 27. We tried to look up the address. I ended up on Rightmove trying to find something, look on the old Google Maps. And we then managed to condense things down and find out that this particular address, and then the address that we then later found, there had been some postcode changes, some districts had changed. Now, this address in 1955 is slightly different from the address that I then managed to trace. Long story short, we finally found the road and we were able to establish that it wasn't 137 or 127 because the road didn't go up that high. So we then, you know, like people do, we did the old pinch and zoom and tried to establish, was this a 2? Was it a 3? You know, we tweaked it, we changed the brightness and everything and changed this and changed that, and oh my days. We sunk between us probably a good 2 or 3 hours that evening, texting back and forth. Eventually, we established that it was number 27. And went onto the old Google Maps, put the little man on the map and moved him here and everything was great. Managed to find, you know, an image of the house, and I felt content for a while. And then I went to bed. And I don't know if anybody else does this, but you know when kind of like, you know, intrigue gets you, my thoughts then go to, who is the owner? And again, bearing in mind, at this point, I wasn't interested in this typewriter. I wasn't going to buy it. I was going to buy the grey one. So I went back and I had a look at the first image that I've got. I will put a picture of the first image so you can understand why I was struggling to be able to make it out. And I believed that it said Miss Mann. I contacted David, who... I said, you know, can you just confirm this? On that receipt, does it say Miss Mann or Mrs. Mann? David came back and he said, I believe that it says Mrs. Mann. Intrigue got the better of me. I didn't want this typewriter, remember? And I then went on the old internet and I googled man, 27 Hemberton Road. And I just wanted to see what I could find. Well, within an hour, I had located a website. On the 1939 census, there was indeed a man family living at this particular address of 27 Hemberton Road. From the 1939 register, are you ready for some receipts? Now, I'm going to lay them in front of me, but on your screen I will be editing them so you can actually see them in more detail. Was this piece of information. I found that the address, which is, as you can see here, listed differently, 27 Hemberton Road, Clapham North, Lambeth, London, England, had a family there under the name of Man. Now, it was able to disclose to me that there were 3 occupants under the name of Man. One record was officially closed, and you cannot obtain access to that. But I was able to establish that there was a John and Ada Man who were married, and they were both registered as living at this address at the time of the 1939 census. Didn't take too much to work out that there was a fairly high chance that the person who brought this typewriter in 1955 was connected to this particular family. So I continued on Find My Past, and I paid for some more search credits. Now, don't judge me. Intrigue got me that much that I then paid £9 to get 60 credits to be able to look at the register. Now, you're now going to see it up on your screen. This is now going to come up on a piece of paper in front of me because it helps me with my notes. I was hoping that I was going to be able to find out from the original paper census the name of the other person who was at this address. Unbeknown to me, the reason why this information was withheld. I find it, and then I am shocked to find that I can see John and Ada Man, who are here and listed as living there, but also there is a lot of other people registered as living at that address. There is a comment here, and I would desperately love to be able to decipher or see the full report to see what this says. But it says, John Man, male, whose date of birth 9th of July 1902, male, and foreman decorator, and I will have to go to here. Now it says Surrey and Branch. Now I think that may actually be Surrey, but it's very, very hard to decipher. And then in the comments on this census, it appears to say travelling heir, and then I believe it may say ministry, but I don't know. I have not been able to find the full part of this census. Even though I paid for this, this is the entire thing that I was able to find. So, going off that, I now have a John Man and an Ada Man. Remember, I wasn't going to buy this typewriter. So, I had another think about it, and I thought, right, okay, there you go. You found somewhat of the family. And, do you know what? I couldn't shake it. I could not shake this particular typewriter. And it was getting ever, ever closer to the day that David was about to say that my grey typewriter was ready and that I could pay and that the grey typewriter would be here. Well, I sat there and I couldn't help it. My heart and my head was invested in this typewriter. I'd now sunk quite a bit of time finding something out about it, and its history was intriguing me. So I sent David a message. I've had a change of heart. I want the green typewriter. I feel so drawn to it now. He said, I can completely understand that. Not a problem. I will need to do some work on the green typewriter. Please allow me some time to do that, and we will arrange the sale. At that point, after I had secured the typewriter, I then went headlong into doing some more investigation. So I then went back and I looked at the serial number, and I managed to find out that this typewriter was produced in 1954. You can go onto a website, it's called Typewriters Database, and you put the serial number in and the model, and it's able to give you a rough idea of when it was made. Some you may even find out the month and maybe the completion date, but this one I was able to pinpoint down to 1954. I will give you a little bit of history also into Olympia. Now, Olympia is what we would now know as AEG. Well, as we know, AEG makes things like washing machines and dishwashers. They have had a long and plentiful history. Now, during the war,
During the war,
the initial AEG company separated off some of the original staff from the I think it was actually known then as AG plant, then separated off, and they went to Wilhelmshaven, and they continued at that particular plant up until 1992. They continued to then go into the photocopying world, etc. And the company officially dissolved in 1992. I spoke to David about this particular typewriter after I confirmed that I would buy it from him. Now, David was able to tell me that he had brought this typewriter in Doncaster from a woman who he believed was a carer or potentially family friend of a gentleman who was passed away, and she was dealing with his estate. That is all David knew. So my head has gone, well, this appears to have been or had roots in London. It was brought from Harrods. I've managed to find the Mann family. How has it then ended up in Doncaster? Intrigue continues. I then get back to old Google again, and I then start to look for Ada. Ada Mann was registered as living at this address. So I started to try and look up things about Ada, and I managed to find out that Ada was born in 1898. So I now had a rough date of birth, year of birth, apologies. I actually had the full date of birth because of what Find My Past was able to tell me. And now I had a year and a date of when Ada passed away. So I then go onto the old Google again, and I go onto Ancestry. Now, I signed up for a free trial because during the 14-day trial, you are able to then access as much as you possibly can for free in 14 days. It's an absolutely fantastic service. I managed to find out from that website that Ada was born in Selsdon, which is 12 miles northwest of Nottingham. I couldn't find out too much information about Ada, so I then looked to John, and I managed to find out that John was younger than Ada, and then I also found a death certificate which said that John had died in 1983 in Chesterfield in Derbyshire. Now, Ancestry is an amazing tool. Once you enter in somebody's information, it then pings a load of information at you. But you do have to be very careful because, of course, many people will share the same name. They might share the same date of birth. They may have even been born in the same county and share those details. So you have to be able to use your super sleuthing skills to be able to work out, is this particular piece of information that you are given, does it match with this? So it then came up with Ada's mother and father, William Henry Watson and Mary Meakin. It then also chucked out at me 7 siblings that had survived beyond birth. Now, there was listed as 5 that had passed away in infancy. I then spent an awful lot of time and I read even more about William and Mary. I discovered that William and Mary both died in 1943 during the war. So I then looked on further, and William's death certificate came up that he had died at 84 Station Road in Brimington, which was a different address from Mary, Ada's mother. At that point, I just looked at it and I established that, that they had then passed away. So intrigue as ever gets the better. I then start to read more about Ada's brother and sisters that the website was saying that were obviously connected. And I then came across a name which was Mabel Reynolds, who was Nee Watson. And it then popped up that she was married to a John known as Jack Reynolds. Interestingly enough, it then had the address of 84 Station Road, Brimington. So this is where Ada was obviously born and that they had lived, and that unfortunately Ada and Mabel's father had passed away at 84 Station Road, and that this was the connection. I then took a little bit away from searching anymore. I continued to contact David. I wasn't getting anywhere. There was part of me that was like, I don't think that on the receipt it says Mrs. Mann. And that it led me to believe that the person whose name was redacted on the information was potentially the person that brought this typewriter, because everything was heading back north and it didn't make sense. So I focused on what I now assumed was Miss Mann, and that John and Ada had had a daughter, and that it was the daughter in 1955 that has brought this typewriter. So I took the information and the assumption that I was looking for a female. I was looking for a female with the surname Mann. And that very clearly John and Ada had had a daughter. So I tried to do a little bit more information. Now, I then actually saved John and Ada into Ancestry, and it popped up with even more information. It was like, save this, save that. And somebody else has a public tree. Now, you can access that public tree when you are on a free trial or if you are a paid up member. It says it's public, but like I say, you have to be paying to still access this information. Then I then got to looking through their tree in the hopes to find this mysterious Miss Mann. I look on there again and I find Ada and I find John, and I find that there is this box and it says private. Oh, frustrating. Private, no information. So I then go off to Google and then I start to, just search, why is some information on historical documents removed or you can't see? And it then says that the reason why is because it's not, the person is potentially younger than 100 years old, or that they could be alive. I then get this pang of hope and realization that the owner of this typewriter could possibly be alive. This person's tree had next to private, there was then an attachment link to somebody called Edward P. Cheesley. It was very obvious that this box, that was also pink to indicate female, was married to somebody called Edward P. Cheesley, who had passed away, which was why their information was on there. So click I go onto Edward P. Cheesley. And then, of course, ding, 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 all comes up these little leaves. And it says to me, oh, we think we might have found a marriage certificate. Ding, 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 yay! Have I finally got something? Maybe. I open up the marriage certificate, and to my joy, my utter joy, it had not redacted the name of the person that Edward married. I found her, Joan. Her name was Joan. Joan Mann married Edward Cheesley. On this wedding certificate, it also confirmed to me, because it has the name of the father and it had Mann, And it all just linked. I got it. I'd finally got the name of the person who brought this typewriter. In theory still, because it could have originally been Ada. But my heart was telling me that it said Miss Mann and not Mrs. Mann. This led me to the conclusion that Miss Joan Mann brought this typewriter in 1955. So information from the marriage certificate told me that Joan and Edward married in 1966. I was then able to now add the name Joan Mann into my newly formed family tree. This didn't ping off any particular searches because at this point I still didn't potentially know if Joan was actually alive, because obviously they update every so often. I didn't have a pinpointed date of birth. I wasn't able to fully read it properly. So I continued to do more searching, and I searched on Edward, the husband of Joan, to see where that would lead me. I opened up his death certificate. Edward was registered as dying in Chesterfield. This led me to believe that at some point Joan and Edward had returned back to Joan's mother's childhood area of Chesterfield, and that they had obviously at some point returned to there. They had lived in London for a while and had then retired and gone back up there. I took to discussing some of my findings again with my friend Sarah. I hypothesised that this lady that I now know as Joan would have potentially been evacuated, and why I couldn't find any information on her in the 40s because there was no census. My theory was that she had maybe been sent away to her grandparents, which I believed lived in 84 Station Road in Brimington. But then, of course, it dawned on me that I'd found their death certificates that they both died in 1943. And then my head was like, oh my days, what kind of life did Joan experience if by that age I hypothesised she would have been maybe around about 13, 14 years old, and both of her grandparents die. I then look further into it. They died 5 days apart. And my heart just went out to Joan, this person who I don't know. What on earth happened? You know, and then I then remembered that the woman Ada, her mother, had been registered as dying in 1958. You know, this sounds such a tragic tale that is all connected back to this typewriter. I decide that I want to find out about Joan. Joan now had become more than just the name and potentially the owner of this typewriter. She had become somebody that I wanted to know about. I wanted to know about Joan's story. I then talked to my husband about what I've currently found, and I explained everything to him because obviously, you know, we'd been discussing bits and pieces as well. And then when I said to him that I'd finally found this person's name, Joan, he then goes off and he himself then starts Googling, and he Googles Joan Cheesley. And he searches for Joan Cheesley, Chesterfield, because I'd explained the connection. And it comes up with a website, and it was the Brimington and Tappan Local History Group. Now, we looked through it because it had pinged up a connection here, and my husband is a bit of a whiz with IT, and he was then able to locate on the website via a search of where Joan Cheesley was pinging up and why this website was coming through to us. Now, the reason why it pinged up to us is because of this. This is a beautiful piece of information, and it says Memories of Wartime Brimington by Joan Cheesley. I was not able to initially access this because it was something that was published onto paper. This particular group, the Brimington and Tappan Local History Group, makes yearly little, news spreads and talking about the history of the town and everything. I was unable to access it. So I emailed them. They were very, very accommodating. And I said to them, that I think I'm so close to finding the owner of this typewriter. Can you give me some information? It says that she wrote something. Am I able to read it? Do you know of Joan? Please, can you just anything? I didn't get a reply initially. So I went onto the old Facebook, the old faithful social media. And everybody knows that there's lots of for sale sites. The village or the town or the city where you live in, they have a for sale in and around. So I searched for Brimington, and this was based off the address that I had found that Joan's grandfather had died at. So I felt that, there was a fairly high chance that there was some kind of connection there, because Chesterfield and Brimington, they're all very, very close within a radius. And I put a post up. I say, can anybody help me? Does anybody know of the family? Does anybody know of Joan? Does anyone know anything? Can someone shed a light here? And it came to nothing. Then thankfully I received an email back from the Brimington and Tappan Local History Group. Not only were they able to tell me about Joan, but they also, on my request, had passed on the information to Joan. Joan is alive. And when I read that email, I had sunk all of this time and I had finally found Joan. Joan, who at some point had gone from this address at 27 Hemberton Road. I'd worked out that she'd gone possibly on the tube. I'd worked out where the tube was and how far it was away from Harrods. And I'd surmised all of these ideas of this journey of how she came to this. And Joan was happy to talk to me. I couldn't believe it. And yesterday, I feel emotional. I telephoned Joan and I spoke to her, and I'm having to take a little bit of a break because it's giving me a lump. And Joan was able to tell me some wonderful, wonderful stories and some of the history into this typewriter and some of the history about Joan. Now, I'm not going to share all of the information that Joan shared with me. I'm just going to share some of the information that she's told me about this typewriter. Joan was gifted £50 by her uncle George. Joan went to then go and buy this typewriter, and she brought it for £34.10. And she used this throughout her career. Now, Joan explained to me that she was a private secretary for, I can't obviously disclose too much information, for a gentleman who was very high up within Lloyd's Bank in London. And Joan was his personal secretary for a long, long time. Joan lived with her father after her mother died. And as we know, Joan married Edward. And they decided that they were going to move, and they were going to move back to Joan's family childhood area of around Brimington in Chesterfield. Now, initially, Joan's dad didn't want to come along, but within a couple of days he changed his mind and he joined them all, and they all moved up to the Chesterfield Brimington area. Joan then continued with her career, and for a while she worked at the Midland Bank, and then she did an awful lot of work with a local hospice. And then at some point, again, I'm not going to disclose too much information, Joan sold off her typewriter. and she sold it to a collector in the Doncaster area. Now, Joan then said to me, "Oh, that's very interesting that you've got it, because I sold it to this collector. I wondered what had happened." So back to David I go, and I talked to David, and David explained that he had brought it, as I've said previously, from a woman who was dealing with the estate of this person. So obviously this person that Joan sold her beautiful typewriter to had passed away. David then brought it, and that's now how I've got it. Well, Joan and I enjoyed a lovely conversation, and she explained to me that during the war in 1939, she did indeed head back to Brimington, and she went back and forth actually several times. She didn't specifically always stay there. Now, the part that I had got wrong, which I had surmised in my head, was that she had stayed with her grandparents. She didn't stay with her grandparents. She stayed with her auntie and uncle. She stayed with Mabel, and they lived in Brimington, and they owned and worked in some of the local pubs. The family was very much based around the Brimington area. She then wrote what I have over here, The Memories of Brimington. And she wrote these in 2014. And there are some absolutely beautiful memories that she talks about. She talks about collecting jugs of beer. She talks about school. She talks about the war. She talks about the war in London also, because there was points where she had gone back and forth. And this very much humbled me, and I loved the story and everything. I now feel that I have this beautiful connection. I was able to take essentially this metal machine and put a face to it, because I now have a picture of Joan, and I've been able to learn a lot of things. And Joan told me how she learned how to type on the typewriter, and how she was very good at not making mistakes. In fact, she even quoted that she never made it a mistake. She never needed any Tipp-Ex that came along with the typewriter. She told me how, when she went through specific training, because she was a part of the Institute of Private Secretaries, that how they learnt they would cover their hands, and you would have to find your way without doing it, and how she could basically be looking at a document over here and typing it and copying it, and it just absolutely fascinated me. I have also contacted Harrods, because the next part of my intrigue is the history of these particular typewriters being sold in Harrods. I hope that this has been of somewhat of interest. You may have switched off absolutely long time ago. Now I'm going to talk about the giveaway that I'm doing. Now, I reached a milestone. I have a goal of getting 250 subscribers to my channel. Last week I reached the milestone of getting 100, and it felt huge to me. So I thought, what better time to introduce my new typewriter and my new logo, and then have a giveaway to celebrate this, small but significant milestone to me. For this giveaway, I would like you to comment down below the name of the person who is connected to this typewriter. And I mean the person's first name, not the name that you can see here. And the reason why I ask you that is because if you've skipped through this video and missed anything, I have spoken to this person, and I have told this person that I am naming this typewriter after her. Because I name all my typewriters, like people name their cars. I name my typewriters. And I have named this typewriter after her. Comment down below the name. You'd need to be subscribed to my channel. So just put subscribed and then the name. I obviously understand that potentially after the first few comments, some people may be able to cheat the system, and there's no way for me to know if you've watched the whole video and the story. That's just a factor that I can't control. I will then pick a winner at random, and I have purchased myself £15 worth of Etsy vouchers for you to spend on maybe a planner or some stickers supporting another small business. I've spoken to Grace from Oodlemadoodles and I've purchased £10 credit from her. The reason why I've purchased from Grace is Grace was one of the first people that I contacted nearly 4 years ago when I first got into planning and stickers, and as many of you know, I've been on the creative team with Grace and we've had lots of beautiful conversations and shared ideas, and it all goes into the history. And then of course I've then spoken to Nikki and I've said, Nikki, I'd like to purchase some credit for someone to spend with you so they can also, you know, start to enjoy your brand. Don't forget that David's link is down below. He's got an abundance of beautiful typewriters, some from beginners all the way right through to some really advanced models. I hope that you've enjoyed this and that you don't think that I'm some kind of weird stalker. I hope that this has, I don't know, sparked a little bit of intrigue into you, maybe. Oh, and just one last thing before I go. I have had people ask me about my channel name. Why Lychee Pink Planner? Well, lychees are a fruit. Oops! There's my beautiful vintage necklace that I adore, that you sometimes see in photos. Here are lychees. They are an Asian fruit. I absolutely adore them. They have I would say a floral taste. My husband cannot stand them because he doesn't like anything floral. You know, for me, I occasionally like a nice elderflower drink, and I love a little bit of floral. I love flowers in general. He can't stand them. When he sees them like this, he goes, "Oh, you eating eyeballs again." I absolutely adore them. And I saw them when we travelled out to Asia and around Malaysia specifically. Oh, it was just something that brought me happy memories. And again, there's history linked to everything. So I named my channel Lychee Pink because they are a beautiful pink. The outer is a beautiful pink. And I'm a planner, so Lychee Pink Planner. Don't forget to enter the competition in. For me to be able to contact the winner, you will need to follow me on Instagram and on YouTube. So comment down below that you are subscribed and the name of the person who initially owned this typewriter and who I have named this typewriter after. Then go and look for me on Instagram and follow me. And I will be putting a picture up of this typewriter, and if you can, then say, "Hi, I've entered the competition, my YouTube name is," and then I will be able to match the two people. If you don't then go on to Instagram, it's unlikely I will be able to contact you because YouTube no longer allows private or direct messages anymore. I hope that all makes sense. So, thanks very much for watching. It's been rambly. I think editing is going to be an absolute pain in the bum. But thank you very much for bearing with me, and I will catch you all next week for another prattle and plan with me. Take care, everyone. Bye.